Welcome back. It is one of those exceedingly rare occasions where I wear the same team's jersey for two videos in a row. But when I'm talking about the all time best seasons when it comes to points in the National Hockey League, it's 99. And, we're into an era now where scoring is up again. And I do wonder if we're going to see more guys on this list, more players hitting that 150 point mark. So that was the cutoff, was 150 points. And I'll start off with Bernie Nichols, 88, 89, 79 games, 70 goals, 80 assists, 150 points. He was 27 years of age at the time. He ended up with 300 point seasons in his career. That 150 point season, though, it raised the bar. He was never going to reach that again. But it was just one of those years. They get Gretzky. Gretzky had a great year, and Nichols had a great year as well. Things just turned out really well for him. But him being on the list, it's a statement to that kind of season he had, where just everything was going well for him. So I want to start at the top. Once we've got past Nichols, I want to talk about Gretzky. Gretzky occupies the top four spots. Then you have Lemieux, two more Gretzkys, another Lemieux, three more Gretzkys, and then two Mario Lemieux, and then everybody else beneath them. Now, for McDavid, the 150 point mark is a big, big thing to do because nobody has hit 150 points since Lemieux did it in 95 96. But back in 85 86, Gretzky, at the age of 25, set the record in the National Hockey League. 80 games, 52 goals, 163 assists for 215 points. He had 15 100-point seasons in his career, and he was all in and of himself just the best player in the league. And back then, if you had a hockey pool, you couldn't just have Gretzky's point totals because you would win. So they would have a split where two people could draft Gretzky and you would get half of his points. Otherwise, you were guaranteed to win your hockey pool. 81 82, he also had 212 points that year, and he set the NHL record with 92 goals. 92 goals, I don't think ever gets beaten. I also think that 215 points, that's unlikely to ever get passed. One question that was asked today in the live stream, and I've seen this asked a few times, is can McDavid hit 120 or 200 points? I don't think McDavid can. Now, that being said, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, will anybody ever get past 120 points again? I probably would have said, probably not, right? McDavid might hit 120, I don't know, 150, that's a little high. So I don't underestimate McDavid, but I don't know that anybody at this point in time in the National Hockey League could hit 200 points with the way the game's being played. But yeah, the 81-82 season, 212 points. 84-85 season, 208 points, 73 of those are goals. Wins the Stanley Cup that year. He was 24 years of age. 23 years of age in 83-84, where he had 205 points. So 81, 82, 83, 84, 84, 85, and 85, 86, each of those years, Gretzky had 200 plus points in the National Hockey League. His down year, 82, 83, he only had 196. And this is why when people ask about, Gretzky, well, was he really the best? To me, to me, and again, this is where I grew up, was watching Gretzky. Yeah, he was the best I ever saw. He could have more assists than everybody else had points, and it is really remarkable. One notable thing, of course, is to see that in 81-82 he had 92 goals, 85-86 he had 52, and yet he still had more points in 85-86 because he was more about the passing. It was less about the goals for Gretzky as his career went along, and it was more about his teammates. Now, the interesting thing with McDavid is it feels like this year he decided, I might as well score a bunch of goals while I'm here, and he's been able to score a ton. So we get to Mario Lemieux's best year, and this is kind of a sad story. So 88-89, he actually missed 4 games due to injury. He ends up finishing with 199 points that year, 85 of those points being goals. He was 23 years of age. Lemieux had 10 100-point seasons. Obviously would have had more if not for injury, for his back giving out on him, and would probably be on this board a lot more with a lot more 150-point seasons. Then you got Gretzky's 82-83 season with 196 points, as previously mentioned, at age 22. At age 26, Gretzky wins the Stanley Cup, 86-87, 183 points there. 62 of those points being goals to go with 121 assists. Like, if you kept Gretzky to 2 points, that was considered a pretty good night. You'd be like, wow, we kept Gretzky down to 2 points. Awesome, because usually it'd be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was just ridiculous. Then you got Mario Lemieux's 87-88 season, 77 games, 70 goals, 98 assists, 168 points. He was 22 years of age at that stage. And that was when the question of Lemieux or Gretzky was asked. And for me, it was Gretzky. And at that time, because we're in the mid-late 80s, it was, well, Lemieux hasn't done anything in the playoffs. Now, interestingly enough, when Lemieux does get things done in the playoffs, those aren't the seasons that are on the board. When they go to the Stanley Cup final and win it, those seasons aren't on the board. Gretzky, 3 of his Stanley Cups are on the board. There's one Stanley Cup win that he had with 149 points. But again, I wanted to cut this off at 150 because then it'd be, well, why not add the 148, 147, 146, and then it just kind of gets watered down. But Lemieux was sort of a different situation for him where he was still helping his teammates while he was still getting all the goals. So if we look at it, Lemieux, 70 goals here, 95-96, he had 69 goals, 92 assists, 161 points, and that's at age 30. Gretzky, at age 30, 41 goals, 122 assists, 163 points in 78 games, and that was with the Kings at the time. His first year with the Kings, he had 168 points, and of course, right in the middle here, first year that I was watching hockey, 80-81, Gretzky ends up with 55 goals, 109 assists, 164 points at 20 years of age. So when I hear about guys coming into the league and, well, he's not going to dominate the league right away, I think about guys like Gretzky, Lemieux, even McDavid, Crosby, Ovechkin. Guys can come in and dominate the league right away if they're that good. So Gretzky absolutely did that. It definitely helped that he played in the WHA before playing in the NHL. I didn't include that in his number 100-point seasons either because officially all the WHA stats, they don't really get recognized very many places. So, and I don't see that changing now that anybody who played in the WHA is retired. So, yeah, the WHA just kind of gets relegated to the basically legend status where we think it existed. But at any rate, Lemieux's on the board 3 times. He's got the 92-93 season, which in 60 games, he had 69 goals, 91 assists, 160 points. Nothing short of remarkable there at age 27 and dealing with various issues. But still, more than a goal per game that year. Absolutely remarkable. Now, Steve Yzerman is on the board as well. 88-89 season, 80 games played, 65 goals, 90 assists, 155 points. He was 23 years of age and had 6 100-point seasons. When the Red Wings started winning cups, at that point, Yzerman wasn't the 100, 120-point, or 155-point player anymore, but he was a great leader and a great team player. And that was definitely something Gretzky had going for him. It was definitely something Lemieux had going for him as well. And so Yzerman's only on the board the one time. But when you look at how he played, and especially if you watched his runs towards the end of his career, you'd be surprised to see he had a 155-point season. Not because he wasn't a hard worker, but because it wasn't really about the stats with Yzerman. Then you got Phil Esposito, who had the record for the most points in a season for a while. 70, 71, and 78 games with Boston, 76 goals, 76 assists, 152 points. And that season set a lot of records. So for Phil, the interesting thing is the Bruins didn't win the Cup that year. They won the Cup the year before. They won the Cup the year after. Phil was 28 years of age. So older than a lot of the other years we're seeing here. Where Gretzky 29 this season, 30 and 30 that year, 30 for Lemieux. And age is important because as players get into their 30s, yeah, these kinds of totals aren't going to be there. So one thing for Connor McDavid that's kind of working against him is he's 26 years of age. He is currently sitting at 80 games, 64 goals, 87 assists, 151 points. The 87 assists are insane. He could hit 90 assists. That'd put him up with Yzerman, put him a couple behind Lemieux. He's still not into the 100 assist category that Gretzky hit seemingly with ease. One that Lemieux seemed to hit with ease as well the one year he got there. But in the 92-93 season, if he'd played 80 games, he easily would have passed 100 assists. 91 in 60 games. Just insane. So McDavid, in an era where the scoring isn't as high as it was during the 80s, has really achieved something fantastic, right? And it's something that, yes, Crosby in his earlier years, if the scoring had been as robust as it is in the National Hockey League right now, he probably would have hit that mark. Probably would have hit 150 points. But McDavid has. And he has populated this list for the first time since Lemieux's 95-96 season. I do think he can do this again next year. But if he doesn't win a Stanley Cup this year, one question that will be asked is one that was asked of others before him, legends before him, of does he have to shave off some points and give up a little bit in that category in order to really help the team come together and really become that leader at both ends of the ice. McDavid does play defensive hockey, plays it more than Gretzky did. Gretzky, not really a defensive guy. Lemieux, he could do the physical, he could do the defensive play as well. Yzerman, complete 200 player by the time his career was over, absolutely. But for McDavid, it is something he's developing each year, and I think he's done a pretty good job at that. So it might be the most impressive season I've seen. It is easily the most impressive season that I've seen while the channel's been going, and it may very well be the most impressive season I've watched since the 80s, going back that far. McDavid at this stage with a 150-point season and with 600-point seasons already, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. If he said tomorrow, I think I'm done with the hockey thing. I'm going to try basketball or baseball or I don't know. I'll try all the sports. I think he could go for it. He's an elite athlete, and B, he'd still be a Hall of Famer. Hockey Hall of Fame would come calling within 3 years of him. He'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. So 3 years after you retire, you're Hall of Fame eligible. So yeah, McDavid's had an incredible run. There's still a couple of games left, so he can still pass Phil Esposito at the 152-point mark. If he gets 4 points, he can tie Yzerman. If he has 2 goals, he would pass Yzerman because Yzerman would have 65 goals. He'd have 66. 70 goals is highly unlikely because that'd be 6 goals in the last 2 games. If he gets there, he'd be the first 70 goal scorer in a very long time. But I wouldn't rule out him getting there at some point this season. So, or not this season, some point in his future. But the question that I would have is, I'll throw the question back at you guys. Now, personally, I don't think anybody ever hits 200 points again. I think that is Gretzky territory. Nobody ever touches it again. But if the league encourages a little more offense, if we see scoring continue to increase, could it happen? Question I have for everybody watching this video. What do you guys think? Where do you put McDavid in the all-time categories? And again, I know Crosby's not on the board and would have been if he'd played in the 80s, but we can only go by what's happened. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.